The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet.
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid.
No. It's the planet stupid.
And our guide for It's the Planet Stupid, Belinda Waymouth. Hello, Belinda.
Hi, good afternoon, Mark. How are you?
Well. Now that you are with us,
Yes.
I count on you not only to give us news of the planet, but to mix in some of the grim news of the planet with some of the encouraging news of the planet. So I turn it over to you in hopes that you do have some encouragement today, as well as, I'm sure, a level of grimness.
Yeah, well, the grimness is for you, and then for everybody else, I will bring the uplifting, because that is my brand as an environmental communicator. I think it's so
true.
important.
I am a creature of darkness, and you bring the light. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's the yin and the yang, and the yang. We're a perfect combo. Okay, so we have to talk about what this CEO of Exxon was saying last week, Darren Woods. I mean, this guy, to do an interview and turn around and tell the public of the world, the people of the world, that we're to blame for not transitioning to renewable energy it's so outrageous. I mean, you can't see it right now. If I didn't have the cans on, there'd be, steam coming out my ears. It's just insane. And, what the fossil fuel industry has done is, and the scientists at ExxonMobil, they knew back in the 70s that they were, putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. They were heating up the planet. It was going to be bad. And what did they do? They started a whole campaign of, obfuscation. And they got scientists, they got people actually who weren't even scientists who went in and testified before Congress wearing white coats like they were scientists. And they, they got these think tanks, they spent all this money, and they changed the whole course of the dialogue.
It might be worth just saying, just for people who, and we have it up on the screen, Darren Woods tells Fortune that consumers are not willing to pay for clean energy transition. I mean, I think your outrage, which because it's been boiling for a while, has outpaced, in this instance, just our ability to fill everybody in on exactly what was said, because they do sell it and package it, as you kind of hinted, in an extremely inventive and almost believable way, where you kind of go, oh yeah, I guess if I was just willing to pay for alternative energies and green energies, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. It's my fault as a consumer.
Yeah, but the thing is, Mark, that's ridiculous, because when he talks about, the people who generate the emissions should be made aware of it and should pay for it, he's actually talking about himself, because fossil fuel, companies are generating, a lot of the emissions before the fossil fuel gets to the pump and we put it into our gas tanks and burn it. A lot of emissions have already been created. So he's actually, one of those people who needs, should be aware of and should be paying the price. But the thing that has happened now is that Exxon has got these lawsuits all over the US. Cities and groups are taking fossil fuel companies to court. So now what they're doing is they're trying to get rid of any kind of responsibility and put it on us. And I thought what was pretty interesting, and the symmetry was pretty stark to me. 2 weeks ago, you and I were talking about what the other branch of the fossil fuel industry, the plastics, started doing in the 70s with their propaganda, and with, ionized Cody, the crying Indian, who was telling us that, people, start pollution, people can stop it. That was the same thing, so now we've got this, years and years, 50 years later, we've got the, Exxon head telling us what, Cody was telling us, is that we're to blame because we won't pay for more expensive fuel. And this is also a very egregious point, because in 2022, the fossil fuel industry worldwide gets subsidies worth $6 trillion plus a year. That went up to $7 trillion in 2022, because everyone was worried about, oil, and Russia had invaded the Ukraine, and what were we going to do with the oil and gas that we all need. And so the subsidies went up. Throw half of those subsidies at renewable energy, and let's see what the prices of renewable energy would be then, and alternative fuels. Hello, why not?
Of course, that's so true. And I'll just read the quote from him. And I love that you mentioned this is an embattled company, because right now they're being taken to court. So you have to understand all of these things in that context, because what they're trying to do is throw the legal stink. It's not just a public relations, the legal responsibility, I'll call it the legal stink, but we're talking about real culpability here, legal culpability, onto others rather than the corporation that's being involved in court cases. So he says in a Fortune magazine interview, the dirty secret nobody talks about is how much all this is going to cost and who's willing to pay for it. He's talking about clean energy transitions. The people who are generating those emissions need to be aware of and pay the price for generating those emissions. That is ultimately how you solve the problem. And he says that the world was not on the path to cutting its planet heating emissions to net zero by 2050. And of course, that's what scientists say is imperative to avoiding these catastrophic impacts of global heating. When are people going to be willing to pay for carbon reduction? And he says, we have opportunities to make fuels with lower carbon in it, but people aren't willing to spend the money to do that.
But I just, if you finish.
No, that's it. I wanted people to actually hear his words, though.
Yeah. But that, Mark, I mean, I take, I mean, that's just ridiculous, because the fact is, as I just said, if fossil fuel, if the
fossil fuels got the same subsidies that dirty fuel did, then
right, and to say that we're not on target, who do you think is responsible for us not being on target? It's fossil fuel companies that are absolutely, they want to get every single ounce, that they can drilled out of, the ground. And what we have been told by scientists for, more than a decade is we can't afford to take any more of that oil and gas out of the ground. It has to stay in there. And, Exxon, of course, they've got these activist shareholders now, who are saying, we want you to transition. And the writing is on the wall. But, and I know this is a bit of a pun, because, what is oil and gas made of? It's made of, dead dinosaurs. But, these guys are the dinosaurs of the energy industry, and they are just holding on rather than, embracing. I mean, they keep on saying, we are going to go to renewables, blah, 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 whatever. But the fact is, they have polluted the commons. They have polluted our atmosphere. They have caused all these health problems for human beings and other species on the planet, not just us. They know it. And what they are trying to do now is to say, we're not the responsible ones. It's you, because you use this energy, and then you won't pay for more expensive energy. Now, the fact is, move the subsidies over to the renewable energy. We've got the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, with a $380 billion, which is helping people, change to heat pumps, get rid of gas stoves, put in solar panels, all these things. But we're fighting this billion-dollar industry. We're fighting an industry that doesn't want to give up and can feel the sort of the nails coming, being banged into their coffin, but they're determined to get every nickel and dime they can out of this industry. And we are not on target. No, we are not for what we need to do by 2050. But I'm not. You can't blame the public. It's them. It's like blaming a drug lord, or a drug lord blaming drug addicts and saying it's your fault. It's not me who supplies you with all of it. It's your fault because you take it, know?
No, that's exactly right. And so when the Exxon chief says, we've waited too long to develop carbon-free technologies, we at Exxon have recognized the need to decarbonize, but you, the public, just won't go for those things because they're slightly more expensive, or they're much more expensive. The reality is that company, Exxon, lobbied against alternative energy incentives. They've lobbied actively to maintain the fuel structure that they have now. They have lobbied for heavy taxes on green energy. I mean, not only have they lobbied against the incentives, they've lobbied for disincentives to alternative fuels. This is a CEO who is really, I mean, speaking out of, I think with utter, it's utter fabrication and as you say, obfuscation, and it's the dirtiest lie, quite literally, that one could launch in this area.
Yeah, he's got oil. He's got black oil on his hands. I mean, this is just so, it's so egregious, and so you can see why activists and environmental scientists were just, hey, this is so. It's ridiculous. He sort of makes himself look ridiculous, but
yeah, I mean, to anybody who really looks beyond just the words in the interview and actually can do the arithmetic in even a rudimentary way, he does look ridiculous. And as you say, they took that money, that the Biden money, the incentivized investment in the alternative energy space. Exxon took that money, but that's not where their priority is. Their priority is in dirty fossil fuel. All right, so we've now cleanly established that this guy, Darren Woods, is a bad dude, and Exxon is a bad actor. They are.
Yeah, they totally are. And I mean, I really like that there are all these lawsuits now against Exxon and other fossil fuel companies to hold them responsible when they knowingly have polluted the atmosphere, our waterways. It just, it has to stop. And this is sort of like, it feels like the dying sort of gasps. I mean, not quite the dying gasps. I wish it did feel like it was more at the end, but it feels like, they're fighting with every ounce of their being to sort of keep, business as usual when everyone knows that it can't be business as usual.
And the last thing on this as we move on is just that I really want people to be aware that taking these companies to court is an answer. You may say, well, it doesn't, I mean, it seems to be off point to take these people to court. It doesn't really. No, sadly, you can see just by his responses, they recognize money, they recognize penalty, and these court processes are part of holding them to account financially. And honestly, sadly, it's the bottom line that matters most to them. So I think that is a way to have an effect on them. What else do you have?
Okay, so let's move on to a good news story in the environment. So we hear a lot about the elephants in Africa and how bad things are for them. So there is some good news out of the southern countries in Africa, from Tanzania south. There has been a stabilization in elephant populations, which is so amazing and fantastic to hear. So elephant populations in southern Africa are back to 1995 numbers. So there are now just under 300,000 of them. Yeah. So 1995 numbers. And there they are. And so why is it so hard for elephants? Well, it's really hard, we know, because of poaching. Poaching is, absolutely huge. And there are, round efforts to try and stop the poaching of elephants and the poach, for their ivory. But another thing, and look, when you see the baby, I mean, you want these guys to survive. But the thing that they've done in these southern African countries, which is, really smart, is that rather than having these fortresses, these sort of islands, which I'm going to show a national park like this, like it's a gated sort of community, basically, of animals, and they only live in that park. And that's a problem, because if resources get tight, because elephants need a lot of water. I think each elephant drinks 200 liters of water a day or something. I mean, it's a crazy amount of water. They forage. But if they run low on resources, they need an area outside of that park. If there is poaching or danger there, they need to be able to move. And so what they're doing is they're creating corridors between the national parks, and they're creating buffer zones. So you don't just have this, identified, area of demarcation that, they don't move out of. They're now creating these buffer zones, and then, natural corridors so the elephants can migrate when they need to. Yeah, you can see here. So you've got these bigger and bigger areas. So rather than living in little islands, like if you look up at the top at 10 and 11, you can see like that's a sort of a small area. But if you get down into the central part around number 3 and 2, you can see the interconnectedness of this. And the thing that's amazing about it is it doesn't just help the elephants, it helps all the other big species. So it helps, the water buffalo and zebra and lions, all of them benefit. And one of the things that's tough in the buffer zones, and one of the big things that elephants are up against, is there's a lot of human animal conflict, because populations are still growing in Africa. The rest of the world, human populations are sort of leveling out, but Zimbabwe still has I think it's a 1.5% population growth every year. So that creates this competition between the elephants and the humans who, want to live in the buffer zone because there's nowhere else for them to be. But the success of it, and the fact that poaching is way down in Zimbabwe. They haven't had any poaching since 2019. They've been getting funding for vehicles, canine units. They use drones, and all of that is helping to, watch the elephants, keep the poachers at bay. And it's a good story for us because it shows us that conservation efforts work. And it gives us then that it is worth the effort, and it is worth giving the $10 to, the Animal Wildlife Fund, or whoever it is that you want to give your money to.
So great to hear that. And it's funny, I was just reading a story from Smithsonian today, actually, about how Asian elephants were engaging in the burial of 5 dead calves. These are very young elephants that were buried in irrigation ditches that were found by the other elephants, and they literally, and the creatures, the dead, I'll just call that they were burying, these Asian elephants that they were burying, showed signs of having been dragged miles by the herd to these special burial areas where they would be safe. They were located by the herd and then covered with soil. They were 26 inches deep, some of them, and they were between 3 months and a year old, and they died from natural causes. I can say I'm not happy with an elephant death at all, but wow, I mean, as you said, poaching is such a huge issue. And again, there was bruising on their back that suggested that the herd members had dragged their bodies over long distances to get to these special places. But the reason I mention it in this context is that these elephants traveled vast distances. They suggest maybe even 2 days with these dead calves on their backs to get them to this special place. And there's evidence that the entire herd of elephants, multiple elephants, participated in this ceremony, burial, whatever you want to call it. Clearly, it was a burial at minimum. And that others in the herd, then they know this from observers who were close to this area, but not close enough to disturb the elephants, that others from the herd came to the area. It's what we kind of talk about, that the elephant herd goes over the bones, et cetera, but sort of to pay their respects. And in this process, it reinforces the sentience of these creatures and the majestic nature of these creatures. I was so touched by the story, and I'm hoping that, villagers tell other villagers, tell the Smithsonian, their photos, and these Asian elephants, they, even as they contact people in less than positive ways, can find their way in this world that is less and less forgiving for them. I just feel these majestic creatures have been so mistreated around the world, and it's wonderful to read the evidence that their elevated conscience, if you will, plays out this way. I was really touched by the story.
They are absolutely amazing because, they will go back to that burial site. They make annual pilgrimages back to the burial sites or the places where they've left their dead. They mourn. I mean, they are beautiful, incredible animals who have this incredible emotional capacity and memory. They know where their dead are, and it means so much to them. I mean, I've watched documentaries about, there was one about this young elephant calf who was born and wasn't able to stand up properly. One of its legs had been bent, in the womb, and when it came out, and the mother, and it's one of its older sisters, was not going to give up on this calf. And It took them days, and they would hold this baby up with their trunks. And the other elephants were like, hey, we need water. We need our 200 liters. We need some more trees. And the mother and the sister, they rehabilitated this calf. They got it, moving and walking, and its leg unbent, and it could keep up with the herd. And, it's amazing. They're amazing creatures. And we owe it to them. I mean, we owe it to ourselves a little bit, but we really owe it to them. We share the planet with these magnificent other species, and we need to respect them.
I feel that way about all creatures, but this elephant complexity is revealed in that story. So, are we out of time? What's our situation?
I think we are out of time. I think we've.
This is a sad way to end. We're out of time.
Well, I did have one other good news story, but we can
Thank you. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Oh, you want it? Okay.
Well, quickly, I need it.
Okay, quickly.
Sadly.
Okay, so
sadly, it has to be quick.
Okay, Medellin, the second biggest city in Colombia, has urbanized at this really fast rate. And what was happening was they were overheating because they were getting these, terrible, urban heat islands that were trapping the heat with all the asphalt and concrete and not enough green spaces. And in 2016, they put up, and you're going to love this, Mark, a mere $16 million. And they said, we're going to take this $16 million and we're going to green our city. And to give you an idea about how awful heat islands are, it can make a city during the day 7 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the rural areas around it, and 2 to 5 degrees hotter at night. And the reason why the story about Medellin is so important is that there are going to be 970 cities in the world. Where does this date by? That by 2050, almost 1,000 cities are going to have their average summer high temperature is going to be 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So what Medellin has done is they've got 150 only amateur gardeners and basically people who didn't have jobs. They said, come, we will give you jobs. You'll plant trees. It'll be lovely. 15 forestry engineers. So these are the people who, said, yes, we need a job. Yes, we'd like to plant trees. They planted almost 1 million trees. The plants that they've planted, so they've got flowers, they've created ecosystems. They did research. They planted plants that would absorb pollution, particulate matter, because it's a city. And they put in all these bike lanes. They have since 2016, they've lowered the temperature of their city by 2 degrees. They have put in 70 hectares of green space. There's been a 34% increase in cycling. I mean, look how green it is. They've got these sides of buildings. A friend of mine was just there, and he said it's unbelievable. Or there's just green everywhere.
That's great. It's so dramatic. Look at it.
Yeah, it's super dramatic. But it's like this is what people can do with a little bit of money. Imagine what we could do with all those trillions that go into oil subsidies if you gave that to us, to green our cities and to switch to renewables. But look what the people of Medellin did. It's really amazing, and they're cooling their city. They're making it a more livable green space, and of course, then you bring in nature, so it's a more beautiful city to live in because you're sharing it with the birds and the bees, and what a nice job this guy's got.
Yeah. The green corridors I saw, that's just that's a great story. And there's so many different ways that can be adopted, as you say, by major cities around the world. And communities around the world in general. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and plants aren't expensive. I mean, they're really our friends, and you create shade, and you create an ecosystem, and a tree holds water. I mean, there are just so many eco services that you get by planting plants, and not just the aesthetics of it. How nice it is to live in a green city.
Sure, those aesthetics actually spill over to psychology. It just feels better to be in a city with green there.
Yeah.
Very cool. Belinda, love our visits, and this one had just enough good news for me. So keep the good news coming.
It just has to be the right balance, right?
I wish it were all good. I'm a worrier, so I go to the stuff to worry about. But really, I really am encouraged, and my spirit uplifted by your good news.
I'm so glad. All right, my pleasure.
Belinda Waymouth, everybody. That's It's the Planet Stupid for today. Bye, Belinda.
More
It's the planet stupid. No, it's the planet stupid.
next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.